mankind to settle all controversies among the federated continents, as prophesied by Isaiah. Describing the aspirations of Zionism, Sir Winston Churchill, writing in the Illustrated Sunday Herald of February 8, 1920, also presents what amounts to a prophetic description of how the ADL would someday be assaulting freedom. It may well be that this same astounding race may at the present time be in the actual process of producing another system of morals and philosophy as malevolent as Christianity was benevolent, which, if not arrested, would shatter irretrievably all that Christianity had rendered possible. It would almost seem as if the gospel of Christ and the gospel of Antichrist were destined to originate among the same people.
Few Americans realize that already in such countries as Sweden, West Germany, Britain, Israel, and Canada, laws banning hurtful words against groups of people are already on the books. In Canada, if we follow a 25-year-old paper trail of newspaper articles, court documents, and articles in the Jewish press, we find again and again two organizations which have played the pivotal role in making hate laws happen. They are the Canadian colleagues of the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith Canada, and the Canadian Jewish Congress. Other groups may be involved in the externals of anti-hate lobbying, yet both behind the scenes and in the forefront, the Canadian Jewish Congress and B'nai B'rith Canada provide the focus and energy for Canada's rapidly evolving thought crime statutes. As a result of their tireless lobbying efforts, the Canadian Parliament in 1971 banned all written or broadcast statements which seek to cause humiliation to certain identifiable groups.
Under such laws, Dr. Paul Cameron, nationally recognized opponent of gay rights, made arrangements for a public lecture in Canada in which the homosexual lifestyle would be criticized. When he arrived at the border, the cases of books and literature he brought with him were impounded. He was told that in Canada it is against the law to humiliate homosexuals publicly.
As anti-hate legislation goes before Congress, the media continue to focus on racial violence, holding up the Aryan nations, the Ku Klux Klan, and skinheads as examples of what society should outlaw. Yet it is you and I, thinking Christians of a conservative bent of mind, who are in danger of being silenced. While gays, communists, abortionists, and radical feminists are not seen as those who hate, every kind of right-winger from Jerry Falwell to the Aryan nations is increasingly perceived as a source of hurtful words. In fact, Christianity itself is coming under scrutiny as a source of hate. Christianity, because of its belief in absolutes of right and wrong, is increasingly viewed as intolerant and judgmental.
A major reason why anti-hate legislation is so dangerous is that the definition of prejudice, the condition it claims to oppose, is ambiguous. A pastor would not think it a form of prejudice to warn a homosexual from his deviant, soul-damning lifestyle. Yet gay rights groups and the ADL would. Testimony of the ADL before Congress makes it clear that the ADL is pushing hard for national acceptance of its definitions. The ADL would prefer that, number one, federal definitions of prejudice be modeled after the point of view of the ADL. Number two, law enforcement personnel should defer to ADL definitions of prejudice when filling out reports on criminal investigations. And three, law enforcement personnel should submit themselves to ADL-led sensitivity training, making them compliant with ADL definitions of prejudice. Further, the ADL requests from Congress that investigating officers should be allowed to determine before trial whether the accused is motivated by prejudice. This would set up the local police, assisted by the ADL guidelines, as a sort of preliminary jury. This power over the accused is very ominous because if prejudice is determined, the ADL wants the crime considered much more serious, with a stiffer sentence.
Clearly, anti-hate legislation is an opportunity for the ADL to intimidate and manipulate Americans. As stated earlier, the ADL exerted relentless pressure upon the Canadian government to ban group defamation. They succeeded. Now, Canadians are in danger of prosecution if they criticize homosexuality publicly, or even state publicly that gays have a higher rate of AIDS than anyone else. In America, the ADL is working even harder. Their initial intention is not to ban free speech entirely, but to convince us that certain forms of speech can be outlawed without doing violence to freedom of expression in general. Incredibly, despite its Orwellian overtones, this legislation has encountered little significant opposition. Few recognize it as the foundation upon which a system of police-state spying and censorship can be built. Throughout the last 3/4 of a century, the ADL has justified its incredible power in the following way. It says that since hatred and intolerance are a huge and complicated problem, a very complex and even powerful watchdog organization is necessary to keep tabs on it. If there had been an ADL in Germany, we are told, there would have been no Holocaust against the Jews. The ADL clearly means business, and that business involves increasing restraint of the free speech of Christians and conservatives. It also means spying on such Americans. Let's turn our attention now to what the ADL above me is doing at this moment, and how that affects our lives. To do that, we must consider briefly how the ADL came into being.
In 1842, in New York, a Jewish fraternal organization, B'nai B'rith, was founded. Eventually, according to the Encyclopedia Judaica, 2,300 B'nai B'rith lodges would exist worldwide, with 500,000 male and 210,000 female members. In the early 20th century, the propaganda arm of B'nai B'rith was created. The Anti-Defamation League's main purpose was to protect Jews from anti-Semitism. During the 1930s, with the rise of fascism, the ADL began to flex its muscles powerfully. It attacked any real or potential threats to Jewish and eventually Israel's interests. The ADL established an incredibly complex and efficient network of propaganda outlets. These exerted tremendous influence over the way Americans began to view Jewish issues.
Increasingly, the ADL has convinced Americans that any criticism of Jewish behavior or the behavior of the State of Israel bordered on anti-Semitism. It is no accident that today the accusation of anti-Semitism is the kiss of death to the career of any public figure. For more than 3/4 of a century, the ADL has single-handedly influenced every aspect of our society to make criticism of anything Jewish a nearly unforgivable sin. How extensive is the ADL's propaganda and information gathering outreach? Listen to Congressman John Rarick in testimony before Congress in 1971.
The world's largest spy network, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, is either too powerful to be curbed or too well embedded to be mentioned or to come under public scrutiny. What is the ADL? It is a private investigating organization engaged in spying and preparing secret dossiers and reports, which it uses to suppress free speech and discussion, and to influence public thought and sentiment of an unsuspecting citizenry. How powerful is the ADL? According to Congressman Rarick, the CIA and the FBI are tinker toys compared to the ADL. In the congressional record, Congressman Rarick quotes the late Senator Jack Tenney of California, who said, "The Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith has become the world's most powerful Gestapo, the brain center of a vast spy network and the intelligence unit of a myriad of Jewish organizations. Their secret agents spy upon American citizens. Extensive files and dossiers are compiled on those whom they dislike. Throughout their multitudinous controls of the media of communications, they are capable of destroying reputations and silencing all rebuttal." A memorandum from the local ADL office charging that a particular candidate is anti-Semitic or supported by someone else alleged to be anti-Semitic is sufficient to defeat that candidate.